Hello, folks. This is Ask a Grief Specialist. I'm your host, Crystal Carpenter. This disclaimer informs the listener that the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the author and not necessarily to the author's employer, organization, committees, or other groups and organizations. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical or mental health diagnosis or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health providers with any questions you may have regarding mental health conditions or concerns. Never disregard professional mental health or medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you may have heard on this podcast. If you are having a mental health emergency, call your mental health provider, doctor, go to your local emergency department, or call 911 immediately. Also, never be afraid to reach out to the caring professionals at the National Suicide Hotline at 1-800-273-8225 by phone or by chat. Today we're going to be discussing facing the death of an abuser. When someone that was abusive to us dies, the grief surrounding that may feel confusing. Often people have an ambivalent relationship with their abuser, marked by mixed, opposing, and often contradictory feelings. People may not get the support they need because people see them as better off or maybe as being free from the abuse or abuser. Victims of childhood sexual abuse perceived a lack of understanding, primarily from others' expectations of how they should react when an abuser dies. The abuser was viewed as not worth grieving, and sexual abuse can be a taboo topic that makes others uncomfortable. Grief reactions such as sadness, love, or compassion did not fit with the narrow societal expectations of relief or happiness. But with any grief, it is important to honor our feelings, whatever they may be. When looking at research, grief of an abusive partner or spouse and ambivalence around the relationship was associated with depression pre-death, but did not predict depression after the death. In a 2003 study, Ellison and McGonigal highlight aspects that may contribute to such feelings, things like relief, positive changes, decreased anxiety levels, and increased freedom. The feelings of ambivalence were linked with abuse, maltreatment, and neglect. Individuals often described a love-hate relationship and a need to both please and distance themselves from the abuser. They communicated attachment and connection, clear recognition of the pain and damage inflicted, and difficulty holding both sides of this duality. They described what would seem like contradictory grief reactions that shifted. The primary feelings described were shock, numbness, relief, sadness, all those things you'd expect to feel. Despite these common grief reactions, people struggled with others' narrow expectations of their grief. When people did experience sadness, love, and compassion, others expressed confusion and even disgust or disdain. Friends and family members did not understand the nuanced and multi-layered nature of the grief. There was a lack of recognition and acknowledgement that feels like disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief is grief that is not usually openly acknowledged, socially accepted, or publicly mourned. When an abuser dies, the opportunity for confrontation, understanding, and connection dies, which people acknowledge feeling regret over. They explain that the death meant a lost chance for clarity around the abuse and for the abuser to know and recognize its impact. Some people express the death represented a lost opportunity for extended connection through reconciliation or a healthier relationship. Research also showed that people mostly chose not to be involved with funeral-related rituals, and for those that did, they didn't find it meaningful or helpful. Motives for this choice included their own emotional well-being and not wanting to disrupt others' grieving process. Oftentimes, people may not know that that person was abusive. Individuals may also be facing the loss of what could have been. Our caregivers are supposed to be our earliest source of support, comfort, and stability, but they can also be abusive, neglectful, or put us in harm's way. Children may grow up wishing for parents like others have, or maybe seeking the approval of that parent. And some children feel the abuse is normal because they do not know any other way of life. And if we choose to be in a romantic relationship with someone, we don't choose that with the anticipation of being abused. We have hopes and dreams for our future. Once that parent or partner dies, we may feel the loss of those hopes and dreams. Losing an illusion. Sometimes when someone is caught in a cycle of abuse, rather than it being constant, we might ignore it, explain it away, or repress it. The loss of an abuser can be grieving the loss of an illusion, which is a protective coping factor that we created to survive. The same can occur with an abusive parent. Someone may express they had a close, normal family growing up, but when describing family interactions, their depiction is one of control, criticism, and/or manipulation. When an abusive parent dies, the grief they experience could include the loss of the illusion of the close family or of an ideal, perfect partner or spouse. When an abuser dies, a person may become aware of how much time was spent in the relationship. Maybe they spent years trying to resolve problems in a marriage or romantic relationship, or trying to get the approval of an abusive family member. We might feel shame or blame for the abuse, and with the loss of the abuser, they may feel overwhelmed with the amount of time and effort they spent trying to change the situation. And generally speaking, no person is 100% good or 100% bad, meaning that we can grieve the good parts of the relationship and of that person. Because of the complexity of this type of loss, the person may not be able to share with others how they are feeling or the good memories of the person. Instead, they may feel shut down by others due to unintentionally unhelpful comments. And having a focus for our anger at times can help us cope and make meaning of our lived experience. Anger is a valid, important emotion, but it can also be protective for more intense emotions such as shame, disappointment, guilt, or sadness. When an abuser dies and we don't have the person to direct our anger towards, this can lead to feeling the more intense emotional pain associated with the abuse. This grief is a little more indirectly related because it is more about the losses associated with the abuse itself rather than the person, but I think this is important to express as well. And maybe you feel happiness in relation to their death. Maybe you feel relieved that the perpetrator is unable to cause any further pain. Often the effects of abuse are deep-rooted, long-lasting, and the survivor may have trauma surrounding it. So the death of an abuser may bring peace or comfort. But that feeling of happiness may be paired with feelings of guilt. Know that it's completely normal, valid, rational, and okay to feel a sense of relief. So overall, know that what is needed is societal shifts and expectations of grief expression and understanding that we can hold two truths at the same time, such as I loved this person, but this person mistreated me. So know that if you are facing the death of an abuser, that your feelings are valid and important. And if you're supporting someone who is facing the death of an abuser, know that all their feelings are valid and important. Allow them to talk about the good parts. Because again, not everything is 100% bad or 100% good. Thank you so much for spending time with me here today. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out at askagriefspecialist@gmail.com.